Welcome to the Badass Direct Sales Mastery Podcast with your direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger. Badass Direct Sales Mastery is a podcast for rockstar direct sales moms who are determined to make their business kick ass. Jennie will share her knowledge of effective sales and recruiting techniques, tips to get what you want from your business, and will interview direct sales professionals and leaders from various companies. The interviews will give insight to how these rock stars got to where they are and where they plan to grow in the future. And now, the direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger.
Welcome back to another episode of Badass Direct Sales Mastery. I'm your host, your direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger, helping you whip your business into shape. And today I have with me Mahesh Guruswamy. And what's really interesting about Mahesh is what we're going to be talking about, but I'm going to give you a little bit of background on him too, because you're probably wondering why I have him here. But here's why. He's a seasoned product development executive who has been in the software development space for over 20 years and has managed teams of varying sizes for over a decade. He is currently the Chief Technology Officer at Kickstarter. Before that, he was an executive running product development teams at Mosaic, Kajabi, and Smartsheet. Wow, I know Kajabi. That's awesome. We're going to have fun talking about this. All right. Mahesh caught the writing bug from his favorite author, Stephen King. Good choice. He started out writing short stories and eventually discovered that long-form writing was a great medium to share information with product development teams. The essays he wrote over the last few years culminated into his newest book. Mahesh is passionate about mentoring others, especially folks who are interested in becoming a people manager and newer managers who are just getting going. Mahesh resides in Orange County with his wife, Krishma, and his son, Vivan. In his free time, you can find him either running in the trails around South Orange County or reading cosmic horror fiction. Welcome to the show, Mahesh.
Oh, it's fantastic. I'm happy to be here.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I already kind of hinted at some things here, but how do you go from being a tech guy to author, and especially the book that you have coming out, which is not what people probably expect?
Oh gosh, so where do I begin? So I spent a few years at Amazon around 2016. So I was part of the team that worked on the first Alexa devices. So the
Ooh.
first version of the Echoes, the Echo Shows, etc. And one of the sort of unique aspects of Amazon is they don't do presentations. So there are no slide decks allowed in any meeting. There are no decks allowed. What they do is a narrative. So I still remember my first meeting at Amazon. I walked in, everybody was silent. I was like looking around, waiting to see, okay, what's going to happen next? Are people, what are they doing? So I found out that they're reading the narrative that was written prior to the meeting. So if you want to present an idea or you want to present a status update, or you have, like an operational review of how things are going, you write a document. You don't write slides. So you go to the meeting with the document and they read the document in that meeting because everybody knows you're not going to read the document before the meeting, right? So
Right.
you go to the meeting, you read the document, and people leave comments in the document, and then you spend the next half of the meeting like sort of understanding what the context is all about. So when I got introduced to that, I realized that I love writing. So,
Oh.
so I think I have a feeling that I've always had it in me, but that was the first time I was allowed to like practice it at work. And I remember my manager telling me back then, like, how do you write all these pages? Like, this is like way too much content for like a day. And that's when I realized that writing is my preferred medium for sharing information. So whenever I had something interesting to say, or I have an interesting idea of how to do a certain thing at work or in personal life, I would write those things down. So as I became a manager and I became more comfortable in that role, when I started managing other managers, which was sometime in 2017, is when I started managing other managers, I realized that, one of the hardest part for me as a manager was how to deliver bad news. So I'm a people pleaser. So I'm like wired to be very nice to everybody. I want everybody to be happy. I don't want anybody to be upset with me. So it was very hard for me to sort of deliver critical feedback to an employee or tell my boss that I'm not going to be able to meet this deadline or tell a stakeholder that we're going to be late on your project. But the reality is, as a manager, you have to be extremely comfortable doing those things. And it is not, people often believe that it is a skill that you're born with. Like either you know how to do it or you don't.
Hmm.
Like giving critical feedback, getting comfortable being the quote unquote bad guy. But I don't believe it's true. So I think there's a technique to be learned when it comes to delivering critical feedback, bad news. So I started writing these like 1 page or 2 page essays, and I would give it out to my managers. Hey, if you're going to deliver bad news to a stakeholder or a customer, keep this in mind. So I will send them like a 2 pager, say, hey, take this. I've been doing that for the last 10 years. And eventually I looked at all the stuff that I've written, and they were like about like 200 pages. So I'm like, maybe there's a book there. And I think one of my bucket list items was to publish a book. So then I started reaching out to publishers, and one of them picked up the phone and said, okay, yeah, we can work with you. And now that turned into a book. So that's coming out on January 14th.
Oh, that is awesome. So, and as soon as I heard what your book was about, because you were actually pitched to me by someone else, right? So
Right.
actually by Turnkey Podcast. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, we were in a group meeting and they're like, we're looking for podcast hosts who would like to interview this guy. Here's what he does. And I went, network marketing leaders need to hear this so much because, you know, and the reason being is because, yes, they have their own customers. So they sometimes have to deliver bad news to customers like, oh, I'm so sorry, the company isn't making that product anymore.
Mhm.
Or, they change the ingredients of that shake that you love so much.
Mhm.
Or, and so now it has this in it that you're allergic to. I'm so sorry. Or whatever. They have these kinds of things that they have to do. And so many of them avoid it. And then they create these issues because they didn't share the bad news or
Mhm.
they
Mhm.
did it in a way that didn't work out. And
Right.
then now they've created a bigger issue, not on purpose, but because they didn't know what they didn't know, right? Which is
Right.
how to do
Right.
this. So, in approaching that particular topic, like well, first of all, what drew you to that particular topic to have to focus on for your team? Did you have a particular incident that somebody didn't deliver bad news or they did it badly and it made you go, oh, maybe I should, this is a teaching moment?
For what it's worth, I don't like that term because it implies that I'm somehow better than everybody. Uh, so I don't use that term with my team because it's like everybody's unique in their own ways. But your
Yes.
question is a really good question. So because I'm a writer, I have like a lot of interest in reading books too. So I read a lot of business books. And often when my teams are struggling, teams or individuals or leaders on my team are struggling with like whatever's on their day to day, I would send them a book recommendation. So I would say, hey, you're thinking about how to motivate your teams, here's the book. Or you're thinking about how to like think big, here's a book. When it comes to the what I like to call the messy parts of management, I couldn't find a good book. So, which is why I started writing my own essays. And I've committed a bunch of these mistakes. Everything that I put in the book, there's a accompanying personal anecdote too. So here's
Oh,
how
good.
I flubbed this delivery to an employee. Here's how I flubbed the delivery to a customer. So, and I realized that there's no like ready-made book. Maybe there is, but I haven't seen one.
Okay.
Uh, so I just started writing it, and that was the kind of the impetus to put this all together into a book.
That is, I think that's a great way to do that, right? Because I was never somebody who I, until very, very recently, I did not have it on my bucket list to be an author. Like,
Right.
I was like, I don't love writing. I don't do it. Like, I don't, it's not something that I wanted to do. But recently, just like you said, I've had this revelation of, oh, I've got this message that I've not seen anywhere else.
Hmm.
I've got this message that others could take value from, and a book is a great way to get that out there, right?
100%.
So you have 200 pages that you had put out to your teams and the managers of your teams with this. How did you end up deciding? I mean, did all 200 pages end up in the book, or did you end up like trimming some
Yeah,
down, or what was that process like for you?
it's a really good question. So when you end up like deciding to write a book, I think one thing you'll have to get used to is the editor telling you this sucks.
Yeah.
So what I did was I put together a manuscript and then I sent it over to the publisher and the editor that I worked with. So it's a team, and their feedback definitely influenced the way the book flows right now. So I had a specific flow of chapters in mind, and they came in and said, "Hey, it's better if you structure it this way." And it was all like really valid feedback.
Hmm.
So not all 200 ended up in the book. Some of the content that I wrote for the book was brand new because they suggested you write a chapter which I hadn't like thought about it before. But it's a combination of what I had before and new chapters that I wrote for the book based on their recommendation.
Okay. No, that definitely makes sense that it would go that way because they're the book experts, right?
Right.
Now, I'm curious what came up for me was did they really come back and say that sucks, or did they read your book and learn how to
Yeah,
deliver bad news to you in a better way?
no, they were like very nice about it.
Of course.
But it's also, like I think it's another chapter in the book is how do you take criticism? Because not everybody takes it well. So there's a chapter in the book about how to receive bad news too. So they didn't position it that way. They didn't say this is bad. They were like very, very generous and kind and respectful. But they said, based on how an average reader will read this book, this is probably a better way of structuring it versus the way you have structured it. Also like the thing that struck me was I had written all those as individual essays, right? Essays don't flow from one chapter to the other.
Right.
So they looked at it and they figured out like how to stitch them together in a way that makes sense for the reader. And all of it was great feedback. I think it was super helpful for me. I think the resulting book came out like really nice.
Well, that's a really good thing because, if they're putting it out, it darn well it darn well better be good, right? So with that, through this process of restructuring the order in which things came
Mhm.
out, is there some sort of framework that you have that you introduce for people to know how to deliver bad news? Or is like, how does that work? Like, where do you start with the idea of, okay, I have something I have to share and I have a feeling it's not going to go well?
It's a really good question. So it is the one thing I realized it's very situational.
Okay.
So when you're dealing with an employee who needs to hear like tough feedback, or when you have to go in front of customers telling them that you're not going to be able to meet their deadline, every situation has a sort of recommended path in the book. So, for
Mm,
example, if you're delivering critical feedback, let's take a more common one for your audience. Like, let's say customers are upset at you about something. I'll share one anecdote from my past. So this actually happened at Kajabi, by the way. So
okay.
when I was the CTO at Kajabi, the email systems went down. So email marketing is a big part of the product's offering. And our customers couldn't send out marketing email. And I think we were down for about like 6 hours or so. And, like my team was working hard to like get it fixed and get it recovered. And in my mind, but then we're getting all this sort of feedback from customers that, hey, this is not acceptable. What is going on? When is this thing going to be resolved? I got a bunch of like personal messages on LinkedIn. People emailed me. And then in my mind, initially my reaction was, why are they not understanding what my team is doing, right? Like my team is working so hard. Like, why don't they get it? And I
Right.
realized that I was not being transparent with them. So the number one thing with like keeping customers calm is to inform them of what's going on. So then I went into the Facebook group and I kind of explained to them that this is what's happening. And here's where we are. Here's what is in our control and what isn't. And then I committed to like keeping them updated as soon as information comes. And even if there's no new information to share, I would go into the Facebook community again and then say, hey, this is what's happening. This is what my team is doing. And that went down really well. Because in the end, like after a few of those like posts, customers started understanding the internals of how things work. And they were like, oh, there's not much this team can do. They were like blocked by this email provider. So it's not much in their control. So for that, the lesson learned for me was transparency. Customers just want to know what is going on. Everybody's reasonable, like nobody is like unreasonable. I mean, Kajabi customers are entrepreneurs, right? So they're every day, every hour that goes without them being able to send marketing emails is like loss of revenue for them.
Hmm.
And they were just hoping that the company understands it as well. So yeah, it depends, it changes from situation to situation, and every situation has like recommendations and frameworks. Like for example, if you have to give critical feedback to your boss, right? Like how do you do that? And every situation will be different.
Right. No, and I like that because I definitely agree with the transparency piece because one of the things that I've talked with some of my clients about in the past is, and I'm also a member of BNI, which is a networking
Mhm.
organization. And from time to time, you have to have those harder conversations. And I
Right.
find that my version of transparency shows up as, okay, I'm going to call out the elephant in the room. I'm, you know, I have a hard conversation that I need to have with you, and so I let him know that this could be potentially a difficult conversation or an uncomfortable conversation or whatever. Like that transparency for me starts with just saying what it is, like,
Right.
and then being able to discuss whatever that may be and what the concerns may be. So that's good to know. Like I hadn't thought of it as that part being transparent. I was just like, just say what it is. you
Oh
know?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think also there are cultural nuances too. So I wasn't
Okay.
born in the US, so I was born in India. And South Asian culture is very much, you don't say bad thing. You always try to please whoever's
Yeah.
above you, right? Like hierarchically, it's like, you try to like always say, yeah, yeah, it's done, it's coming, So but then I been here for like 20 plus years and I realized that okay, that's not gonna work for corporate America, right? It's just not gonna work. And that was part of my learning as well.
Yeah. Well, and I like that you also then brought up delivering bad news to the boss, right? Because in network marketing, there aren't bosses, right? You
Yeah,
have your upline and your downline. You have people
right,
who are on the same level as you, but you're not in each other's lineage
right,
necessarily, right? And so being able to have a harder conversation with your leader, is just as important as being able to have the conversation with your downline,
right. That's right.
right? So let's go there because one of the things that I've noticed about my own business is that I tend to attract people in network marketing who have become what I call an orphan,
Hmm.
right? They've either their leader left for whatever reason, or there was an issue between them and their leader. And so now they're both still in the business, but they're banging heads. They're not getting along. They're agreeing to disagree. They're just not talking. Like you do you, I'll do me, and just they avoid each other at all instances. But now my client doesn't have a leader to lead them anymore, right?
Right, right.
And all of this could have potentially, now I'm not saying it will, but potentially have been avoided had a good conversation been had. So, how do
Hmm.
you have a conversation, a hard conversation with someone who's, quote, above you, whether it's a boss or a leader in this
Yeah.
situation?
I mean, it's hard. The one thing I would say, this applies to all situations. So if you're in a team, right? So if you're in a team, you're working with each other, one thing I've come to realize is, it's not natural for people to resolve conflicts on their own. It is not a skill that everybody learns because there's
Mm-hmm.
no one set way of doing it, right? So one of the things that, and a lot of companies do this, and Amazon being one of them, is they have a set of behavioral tenets that every employee has to follow. So if you go to Amazon and search for leadership principles, that's what they call it. And they're essentially like behavioral tenets they want everybody to like use. They act as owners, or they deliver results, or they earn trust, etc. So what that does is it gives people a common language to use. So you can
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, this is not earning, this is not like ownership. Like you're trying to like get out of owning this. And that, in my experience, is a better way of resolving conflicts in a larger team versus teaching individually, like how to resolve conflicts with each other. That's one thing, just as a, like when I go to a team and there's a bunch of conflicts there, I don't tend to like teach people how to resolve conflicts. I instead say, from now on, everybody on this team is going to follow these 5 rules. And these 5 rules are whatever I think are the right set of rules that'll help this team move forward. So it'll
Mhm.
be for the next year, we're going to have releases every month. Or, if you have a conflict, this is how you resolve it. Or everybody's going to act as owners, etc. I think in my experience that has worked well than teaching individuals how to like resolve conflicts because it's not natural. It's like, humans are not designed to like constantly keep arguing with each other and resolve conflicts. When it comes to like, giving critical feedback to your boss, the one thing that I learned is either do you ride a motorcycle?
I have ridden a motorcycle. I don't drive
Okay.
motorcycles.
So a long time ago, I used to ride motorcycles, and I took a class from Harley Davidson to like just to learn how to ride a bike.
Sure.
And one of the things that they do in the class is they teach you how to put the bike down. So like put it down on the ground because they're like, we're going to teach you how to put, make you put the bike down and they teach you how to pick it up because those bikes are very heavy and you
Yeah.
can't just deadlift them. So there's a specific way of lifting the bike, which is like put your back into it and then walk backwards is the way you straighten and like a overturned bike. So the
Hmm.
reason they do it is because they're like, this is the best way for you to learn in a safe environment because chances are it's going to happen in the wild and you wouldn't know how to pick an 800-pound bike. So, one of the things I do is when I get a new manager, I tend to like give some small critical feedback early on in a relationship just to see how they respond to it because I don't want it to be, everything is great for months and months, and then one day suddenly you're like unhappy with your boss and you have to give them critical feedback. So I kind of test the waters early on just to see how the specific leader responds to critical feedback. And some people do it well, some people like take it well, some people don't. And then I know, okay, if I give this critical feedback, then this is how this person is going to react. It all comes down to how well do you know the other person? And I recommend I call it like figuring it out during peace times versus the conflict times. And when you give critical feedback to a boss, if you have already done your homework, you know how this person is going to react, right? So you can say,
Hmm.
okay, now this person will react great or not, they're not going to react great. So here's the thing though, right? If you have like really hard feedback to give and you know the manager is going to react poorly, do you give the feedback or not? That's the question that I think a lot of people like struggle with. And my recommendation is to give the feedback, but then be ready for tough things to happen after,
Hmm.
right? So if I decide that this person is going to react to my feedback well, but I still have to do it because it is like eating away at me, I decide that, okay, what's the worst case that could happen is I get fired. And I walk into this conversation ready for that to happen. Because the downside is you don't give the feedback, it's like eating away at you, and then you're not as productive as you could be if you're like fully like ready to go. So whenever I decide to give extremely critical feedback to my boss and I know that person's gonna take it well, I'm ready to walk out
Yeah.
and just go find another job.
Right. That's so good because I think it's absolutely true that, ultimately having the conversation is better than not having the
That's
conversation
right,
because
100%.
I'm pretty sure I've told this story on the show before, but there's 300 episodes and not everybody listens to all episodes. How dare they? Just kidding. Um, but when I realized that network marketing has an issue with retention,
Hmm.
right? That there's 90% turnover in the entire industry,
Wow, okay.
right? What I wanted to do was find out like what are the things that successful people in network marketing are doing. But then I also went to the people who had quote unquote failed, the people who had left,
Mhm.
the people who had quit, right? And I'm not trying to say that in a judgmental way, right?
Sure.
But that many of them, that's how they felt. They felt they had failed. They acknowledged that they quit. They, whatever it
Mhm.
may be, right? but I went to them and because I wanted to know, like, what made, what do you think made you not successful? Because I needed to know. And some of the people that I talked to were my former team members, the people that I brought them in and then they left. And because I was like, if the issue was me, I can't do anything about it if I don't know. But they left without ever telling me that the issue
Oh,
was me.
okay. That's a bummer. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Right.
it's like, oh man, I wish you would have said something because maybe you'd still be here. You know, maybe there's something I could have done. Could have learned how to do that thing better or learned how to have a better conversation with you or learned how to support you better. Because if I learn how to support you better, that helps me support others, right? Who are
Right.
similar to you, right? So,
Right.
but having that hard conversation, I wish they would have had it. And I recognize that not every leader maybe feels that way. They want to believe that everything is, you know, roses and rainbows. But let's be honest, if you're going to lose 90% of your team, but if all they had to do was have a difficult conversation with you,
Right.
and you had a 5%, 10%, 20% chance of keeping them around, wouldn't you want to have the hard conversation?
Well, yeah, you're exactly right. You're 100% right. I think that's what I try to do is create an environment where people feel comfortable giving me critical feedback that, hey, wasn't great, or this interaction wasn't great, or this thing wasn't great. But again, this might come off as controversial, but my view is you don't companies don't hire CEOs for their people skills, right? If you if you look
Truth.
at the most successful leaders in the world, most successful like technology leaders or corporate leaders, they're because they can make the impossible happen, right? They
Yes.
have extremely good business skills. They can get stuff done. They can like show a positive return on investors like investment. And I think people skills is not like a requirement for them, right?
Right.
I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it is. That's the
Yeah.
way it is. So like there are definitely like empathetic, people-friendly leaders who can sort of, do both things well. But if you get to the executive level, I have seen this quite a bit, is not every CEO is wired like that, right? Because, investors like CEOs who can show quick changes and quick turnarounds and can help the company grow quickly. Because to them, employees are just, you can just replace them anytime you want, which is true, right? But doesn't necessarily mean you should do that.
Right. Exactly. And that's one of the conversations I've had with some people in my life who are, I would say, they follow the behavioral model of the quote unquote successful CEO, right? They're going after results because my training is in the world of DISC. Are you familiar
No.
with DISC behavioral analysis? Okay, so recommend you go look into it. But
Okay, I
basically,
will.
the stereotypical CEO is typically what's considered a high D on the DISC, right? They're
Okay.
very driven, they are dominant, they are about results and not just results, but fast results,
That's right.
right? And one of the conversations I had with somebody who was like that was, have you considered that you could increase your results by improving your people skills, right? Incorporating a little more of the I in
Right.
certain situations with certain people, incorporating more of the S in certain situations with certain people. And you could get more results from those people rather
hmm
than having to go through the pain of firing them. Now you have to go through the prospecting process, and then you have to go through the hiring process and the training process. It's actually faster to work with the people you've got,
That's right.
but
That's
you've got to
right.
work on this. Like, have you considered improving those people skills to work with what you have rather than try and go through that churn and burn?
Right. 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 Right.
Right.
Right.
So, and it's something that had not had not occurred to them because they were just like, this is just what I have to do. This is the way
Right.
it's done.
Right.
Right. And it's like, well, imagine how many more results, how many more positive results you'll get if you take care of the people you've got.
hmm
Now you're going to attract more people who are like that.
Yeah,
Because,
that's exactly right. Yeah.
it's because how many people want to work for Amazon? How many people
Right.
want to work for Google? How many people,
Right.
it's companies get those reputations for being a good place to work, because they create a culture
That's
that
right.
takes care of the people, right? And this goes back to what you were saying before, which is that culture piece, those leadership principles that Amazon
Mhm.
had, for example, gives them the common language
Right.
with which to in which a common language in which to speak,
Right. That's right.
right? And all people have made the same kind of commitments, which is really funny because that's a BNI thing too. BNI is known for culture, like creating a very specific culture, and because culture eats strategy for breakfast every day.
That's right.
And I think it's because of what you talked about. It's the ability to say, hey, we all committed to ownership, right?
Right.
That in that
100%.
language.
Right.
Like,
That's exactly
oh,
right.
so good. So by this point, I'm sure there are certain people listening going, I need this book. I need to know how to have these conversations. I need to know how to do this. What is the name of the book? Because we've never even said the name of the book
Oh,
yet.
that's right. That's right. I just realized it. So the name of the book is How to Deliver Bad News and Get Away with It. And the get away with it is sort of tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you sneakily deliver bad news. It's more how do you deliver bad news and keep your sanity. And it comes out on January 14th. It will be available in all places where books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, etc. And I think the podcast notes will have a link to the book
Yep.
for your audience who are interested in buying it.
Absolutely. Definitely. So, of course, my badass crew already knows how to get to the show notes so that they can find the link. But just in case we've got a new listener who saw the title of this episode and went, oh, I want to hear that. And so maybe they've never experienced show notes or episode notes before. All you have to do is grab your phone, assuming you're listening on a phone, as long as you're not driving. Click on today's episode, scroll under Mahesh's picture, and guess what? You're going to find there. You're going to find a link to the book so that you can go get that book if you would like. Now, in addition to that, Mahesh, how would you like if somebody says, oh, I'm getting the book, but I want to reach out to Mahesh. I want to connect with Mahesh. Where can they connect with you?
The easiest way is to find me on LinkedIn. And I think this is not in the show notes, but people can also go to maheshguruswamy.com. So
Okay.
that's my personal website. There's the information there, like how to contact me. Yeah, two easiest ways, LinkedIn and then maheshguruswamy.com.
I love it. So we will definitely put your LinkedIn link in the chat, and we will also put your personal website in there as well. Or not in the chat, I'm sorry, in the show notes. Isn't it nice to know you don't have to be perfect to be a podcaster? um, so we will make sure all of those are in the show notes as well. So if you guys are listening to this going, yes, I want to learn how to do this, then you can get the book. You can go follow him on LinkedIn, follow what he's saying and doing. And of course, if the book's already out, go get it. If you're listening to this and the book's not out, go pre-order or at least go save it so that when it is available, you can get it. So, Mahesh, thank you for being here and sharing this brilliance, because I really honestly believe that this is going to help some leaders in the world of network marketing be able to improve their own experience and the experience of their team members. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And of course, badass crew, you know how this goes. Stay tuned because there's another badass episode on its way.
Thanks for listening to the Badass Direct Sales Mastery Podcast with your direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger. Why are you waiting to go to badassdirectsalesmastery.com? Don't make the dom get her whip. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with another rock star that you know in direct sales after you subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. You can also check out the show notes for links and any contact information mentioned in today's episode. We'll see you next time.